In the studio again with me today is none other than Professor Damon Fordham, and it's time to get into your world, man. It's time to
Okay.
get into your world and find out what you've been doing. And anybody out there right now, if y'all want to call in, the number to call in to talk to me and other Professor Damon Fordham. I mean, he's far more interested than I am. Is 843-614-4160. 843-614-4160. If you have a question or a comment for the Professor Damon Fordham, please, by all means, call in. He'd love to hear from you. So let's talk about your world, man. What's been going on? I mean, you're fresh off of Black History Month, Damon.
Yes.
And I know you have been doing some things. Let's talk about everything you've been doing in the month of February. And then I think there's a book that's coming out soon, huh?
Well, actually, I finished my fifth book last year. It's been out for a year, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But to answer your first question, I've been speaking around the state of South Carolina over the last month. I've went back to my native Spartanburg in the Woodruff area. I've been to Dillon, Florence, Sumter, and Columbia, as well as day before yesterday at Trident Tech, basically engaging with the people and bringing to them this history that they wouldn't ordinarily get, because it's a relative few of us who go into the archives and dig up these things and bring it to the average Jane and Joe on a level that the average person could understand, because so often in academia, people talk over the heads of the average person. And then along with it, unfortunately, a lot of people nowadays, they are getting a lot of this misinformation from TikTok and social media by people who either don't know what they're talking about, or they're trying to propagandize them one way or the other. And I try to explain to people that with TikTok, I mean, you only get like 1 minute of information, and it doesn't break down like that. And so I tell them that going to TikTok for your information on history and serious subjects is like going to Ray Charles for driving lessons. It's for entertainment purposes only.
Yes.
And so, since so many people in the academic field, they either don't have the inclination or the ability to come down off that mountain and relate to the masses of people, I feel that that's what I try to do.
Yeah, and Damon, that's very valuable, man, because we got to have we got to have a balance. We've got to have a balance in America, and so what I know, I think, and in your profession, you provide that. You provide a balance. One of the things I did want to I did want to share with you. And I want to get your opinion on it.
Sure.
There's a gentleman on the station in Cincinnati that I'm familiar with, and talk with him often. He is a historian.
Okay.
And I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but he calls himself a her, H-E-R. And so I said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh, I don't know if a man should be calling himself a her. He said, Jay Wright, I am a her. He said, I am a historian, an educator, and a researcher.
That's clever.
And I said to him, wow, that creates a her. That creates a her. So, I think you kind of balance a little bit of all those: historian, educator, and researcher.
Yes, but I'm not going to call myself her.
All right, good. I just wanted to clear that up.
I'm straight up H-I-M, okay? I mean, if they choose to do that, I mean, hey, you do you. But in me and my house,
You're not going to be a her. Huh?
No.
How much history, education?
That's right.
And
that's
a researcher.
Right. There you
go.
go.
Okay, good. I did want to kind of get into something with you a little bit and pick your head on.
Sure.
When we look at history and we look at iconic figures, and there's two come to mind. I think of Frederick Douglass, and then I think of Thurgood Marshall.
Right.
Right. And the two were different. Right. How far would we have gotten without the Thurgood Marshall Brown versus Board of Education?
Not very. And I think I want to extend that to both of those gentlemen, okay? Because you see, Frederick Douglass had to literally find scraps of education from other people here and there throughout his youth in order to learn to read or write, because being enslaved, he couldn't go to school. Okay? So he went from that to advising Abraham Lincoln on the freedom of our people, as well as having the African American troops literally fight for our own freedom during the Civil War. So he's of major importance. Thurgood Marshall, well, there was a man before him by the name of Charles Hamilton Houston that laid out the strategy for Brown versus Board, in that the Plessy versus Ferguson in the Supreme Court said that things could be separate, but as long as they were equal. So Charles Hamilton Houston first, and then when he died, Thurgood Marshall carried it on to show the world that we had plenty of separate, but almost no equal. So in order for that to make it possible for Thurgood himself to become on the Supreme Court in 1967 to continue to fight for the rights of our people on the highest level in the land. So the two of them are very important, but South Carolina in particular also has the Robert Smalls, the Robert Brown Elliots, the Richard Harvey King, the founder of Mother Emanuel AME. I can go on, and Esau Jenkins over in Johns Island. We have a long history within the state of people like that. But see, since most people don't have access to this information, that's why it's important that people like myself study the teachings of these people and put it out there in forums like this and on social media where the people are, so that even when these leaders are gone, what they taught will remain and be planted a seed in the minds of the young people, so that they could take those seeds and grow up and use that to be the guiding lights of these new dark ages of ignorance.
Well, well said, sir. Well said. Well said. And, a lot of, without the Frederick Douglass of the world, there may not be a J. Wright.
Oh, no.
U.S. Army veteran.
Oh, no.
Of the world, right? Because he pushed Lincoln to.
That's right.
To have us included in the Civil War. And I think that in itself, when we look back at, if you're a military veteran, and that is something you need to be aware of.
Oh, yeah.
Because without the Frederick Douglass of the world, there may not be a Master Sergeant, or there may not be any Black military period representation.
Exactly.
So that is huge, and nothing is more important than you as an educator than education. So I wanted to bring those two topics to you because I admire those two gentlemen. I absolutely admire those two gentlemen for both of the reasons that in which we're stating now. So let's talk about the rest of the February. Where all have you been, and what all have you been talking about, and where do you think? I know for a fact that it's very easy for you to run around here in the state. Is there some plans beyond the state of South Carolina? And let's talk about your run in the state this month, and how you were received, and some of the questions you may have gotten that might have been a little different, or just some you hadn't been asked before.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would definitely love to do this beyond South Carolina. Back in August of last year, I gave my walking tour, The Lost Stories of Black Charleston. I gave it to Madam Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and she was very impressed. And so we talked about the possibility of me maybe one day going to Washington, D.C. and do this kind of thing in front of a larger audience. And I have my YouTube channel in which many are watching this program right now as we speak. So in order for me to be able to get to such audiences, and even when I was in Africa, I had offers to teach there, and I spoke to students at the University of the Gambia in Banjul over in West Africa. And as a matter of fact, I have a pretty large following in Africa because of my YouTube channel. When I was in the airport in Ghana, a number of students recognized me from that. So I'm definitely taking this thing to a much larger level, because a lot of people took the time in my youth to teach me things. I know you remember Miss Martha Jenkins, our scout leader.
That's right.
She had ebony magazines that were filled with this history, and when I would house sit for her, I would read those. Mr. Walter Snipe, who most of y'all called Son back in the day, he had a book at his house called Eyewitness: The Negro in American History by William Loren Katz. And that book taught me a whole lot of things that I would have never gotten within the classroom. And then I used to love to talk to the elders around there who lived through a whole lot of things. Miss Martha Jenkins, as a matter of fact, Adam Clayton Powell, the great New York leader, was her Sunday school teacher.
Wow.
And so therefore, so you and I were fortunate to come along at that time. We were probably the last generation to grow up in the village, where the other adults not only disciplined you, but the other adults taught you things. The church taught you things. The scouts taught us things. And even to a large extent, our teachers taught us these things. So we grew up with a sense of community that we could one day grow up and lead ourselves and lead other people. But a lot of that was destroyed during the days of the crack epidemic, when a lot of the elders of that generation died out. And unfortunately, a lot of our generation got misled during the crack epidemic, and then their influences became a lot of the rappers that were teaching them the wrong things and so forth. So we have to basically start anew. And those of us who were the survivors of all of that have the duty to bring the best of that old information out to the young so they don't get misled, because there are people on social media right now misleading them left and right. There's one group out there telling them that to separate themselves from the Africans and the Caribbean people and so forth. You have a clown pseudo-historian telling them that the slave trade never happened and that Harriet Tubman was a fictional character and all this. And see, since these young people don't have anyone in their homes or their communities to teach them better, in times of crisis, false prophets do well. So that's why it's important that people like yourself and myself, and especially myself, because when I was in Africa, I sat with great scholars like Dr. Hassoum Cissé at the University of Gambia in West Africa, and Dr. Ousmane Sene at the Cheikh Anta Diop University in Senegal, and folks like that, and Ambassador Stephen Kojosaki down in Ghana, and these folks, they all played a part in teaching me a lot of things that I did not know, so that I can synthesize both the wisdom of Africa and the wisdom of America, and trying to get that across to the youth.
You know, that's and that's extremely valuable. You know, I'm blessed to have two gentlemen that I talk to regularly. I mean, almost every day. Fred Lincoln and Joe Palmer.
Right.
Two gentlemen that have a lot of experience going back and forth to Africa. I think Fred Lincoln has adopted several kids in Ghana, and of course Joe Palmer. I talked about him.
Right.
Like he's my father almost. He's like a dad to me.
And don't forget Professor James Small.
Oh yeah, Professor James Small. That's right.
Who's my cousin, by the way.
That's right. Him and I, we talk. We talk, and that guy does so much wisdom, man. And just like to tell me what to do. His favorite thing, I think, is to tell me what to do. And I listen, of course. You know, but like I was talking about Joe Palmer, he's like a father to me, and we were just recently talking about how in 1974 was when he took his first trip to Africa. And in 1974, he left Africa with a vision to build, have own property in Ghana. So these 10 kids that we're going to send to Africa, to Ghana, they're going to go stay with Joe Palmer, a man that's from Mount Pleasant, right? And also part of our committee. But what's more important is we talked about his brother, Henry Palmer, which started one of the first brick masonry companies over in Mount Pleasant.
Right, he was married to one of my cousins.
Oh, was he? Henry Palmer?
Yes.
Yeah, he started one of the first brick masonry companies in Mount Pleasant. I honored him on Friday night at our Black History Month finale, and for all the great work that Henry has done. And I wish I had brought the information with me. I didn't realize how many, I think Henry done built 400 or 500 houses in Mount Pleasant and several churches. So we're going to honor him as a pioneer next year for the Black History Month program. But it was just it was amazing to know that that Joe went to Africa in '74 with a vision to build a bread and breakfast that he now has, but Henry helped finance that. So had it not been for Henry, Joe would have never been able to finance or have that building in Ghana, West Africa.
Well, that's how it works. I mean, none of us does this by themselves. That's why you always hear me when I talk about these things. I talk about the people who taught and influenced me, so that people understand this is not about a solo show. Because, see, what often happens is we put all this leadership and education on one person, and when that one person dies, everything goes to pot, which is why I think it's important now. You mentioned Jesse Jackson a little bit earlier. I have Reverend Jackson's book, Straight from the Heart, which was a lot of his really deep sermons, and I've met him on a couple of occasions. Currently, right now, I'm using as my portrait on Facebook a picture that I took with him back in 2019 and all of that. And the thing is, this works as a continuum, okay? Martin Luther King was Jesse Jackson's mentor, right? And so, like recently, Congressman Clyburn came to speak at the Citadel where I teach right now. And there's one of my young students, a young lady from Nigeria, who he was speaking with at length, and he was complimenting me in front of her, which I appreciated. And so the three of us took a picture together. So I told the young African student, when you have your children, remember this. You took this picture with a man who sat on the stage with Martin Luther King when Martin Luther King was in Charleston in 1967. So you tell your students that you knew a man who was just one person away from Martin Luther King, and that your mother was two people away from Martin Luther King.
Yeah, yeah, very, very, very important, very important. I mean, those are treasurable moments. And like you said, you've had an opportunity to spend some time around Jesse Jackson. You know his work. And so, we growing up in our era, those folks were iconic figures. So.
Oh, definitely, because I remember when I told Reverend Jackson when he came here about how in 1978 we went to hear him at the Gilliard Auditorium.
That's right, I remember that.
Right, because you remember that in the audience, the kids were clowning and playing radios. You gotta feel like a thing going down, getting down, and so forth, running around making noise. When he came on stage and just waved his hand like that, everything, you could hear a pin drop, because he commanded that kind of respect.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I told him, I remember a lot of what he said that day. He told us that you cannot teach who you do not love in regard to teaching and students and so forth. Wow. And the thing about that's important about Jesse Jackson that people don't talk about is that at a time when even those who were sympathetic to us really believed that black kids were good at all things physical and nothing mental, and made all these excuses as to why we didn't do well in school, he wasn't hearing that stuff. He told us to make a covenant with our teachers and our parents to do well in school. It was called the Push for Excellence program. And that's a major part of his legacy, because I don't see hardly anybody doing that now. And so I think it's important to speak on that, to let these young people know, hey, listen, all these people making the excuses of, well, black kids don't do well because blah, blah, blah. Listen. These African kids come here and they outpace even the American white kids academically in many cases. So there is don't listen to anybody who tells you any junk that because you're black, you're good at all things physical and nothing mental. No.
Powerful, Damon, extremely powerful. And you said it, and this was a discussion I've had some on another station, as I often say, and it was in regard to the American students and how those that come from other countries come to America and they far exceed and do so much better than the American students. Right. And here's in that there was a conversation that was, well, it was said to me that the young black kids don't have any black teachers that they can model like back in the 60s and the 50s when, and I said to them, and I got a call up, I'm gonna take the call in just a second. And I said to them, wait a minute, let's not do this, because teachers teach. They don't look at the color of the students, they just teach. And if you're interested in learning, listen. It doesn't matter whether that teacher is black or white, their job is to provide instructions. And if you're waiting for the black teacher to arrive,
you can wait for a long time.
You can wait for a long time, and you may be in the first grade for 12 years because they may never arrive. So don't discriminate. Don't use education discriminational tools.
Okay, well, let's hear this call, and then we can...
Let's get the caller, and then we'll get back to that. Good morning, caller. Welcome to WJNI 106.3. You're on the J. Wright Show. Good morning. Cousin Al, what's going on, sir? Well, you're right, Al. It's going to be very interesting to see how all this unfolds. And what I envision as a man that's been have served in conflict is that this is not going to be short. This is not going to be a 1 or 2, 3 day issue. This is going to be a very long, very, very long, and it's going to come with consequences. So as he's indicated already, that there will be casualties. There will be American lives that will be lost. He's saying that because he know that factually. And not only is he saying that because I think when they went in and got and took the man out of office in what country was that in? I think that was in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. You know, it was led to believe the next day that they went in and took him out and we suffered no casualties. Only to find out days later that people were shot and in hospitals and everything else. So what I believe is going to happen with this, and either you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of casualties, but I think we're going to get less coverage. So I think they're going to censor the coverage, and then we're not going to know all that's happening until afterwards because they have the ability to censor what we see.
But that's always the case. We never find out until later.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Well, cousin Al, man, I always appreciate you, man. I appreciate you, and cousin M being sponsored on the show. I thank y'all so much. So you've been dedicated.
Fordham. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. You know where he lived on Morrissey. He lived on the same street my granddad lived on. Yeah, Good Lord used to tell me. Good Lord was my grandfather.
Right, I remember him.
Good Lord used to tell me all the time, that boy right there, real smart. That's a smart young man.
He said that? I didn't know that.
my granddad would always tell me all the time. Listen.
Okay, I didn't know he said that.
My grandfather, I would, because he drank a lot. I mean, he drank a lot.
I remember.
Matter of fact, he drank so much that I thought it was legal to drink and drive, because it seemed like whenever he got behind the wheel, he popped the can.
A lot of people did that back then. Sad to say.
So ironically, here I am at 9 years old, and I was forced to drive him around whenever he gets too drunk, and he would always tell me when he see you, that boy right there is smart. You need to be smart like that boy. But anyway, thank you, cousin Al, man. I appreciate you, man. That's right. All right, take care, man. All right.
So back to what you were asking me about. Here's the situation with that, okay? Everywhere I went in Africa, the students were respectful. They stood up when you walked into a room. They were very attentive. You can go into at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop in Dakar in Senegal. I literally saw hundreds of students around computers with no noise in the library, okay? Mm. And the same was true when I went to these orphanages, schools in Ghana and Gambia and other such places like that. Because you see, they still have that whole village culture intact in much of Africa. And plus, the young people understand that education is the key. Now, as far as the Black Americans, the idea, I was reading where Booker T. Washington in 1909 in Story of the Negro said that it was impressed upon him at an early age that the darker your complexion, the lesser the intellect. So if you hide education from people for a long time and forbid them from getting educated, after a while you tend to wear down a people's resolve in many cases, and I think that's what happened. But what bothers me about that is that because athletics and music were the only places where we were allowed to succeed for so long, people didn't stop to see the bigger picture, and many really came to believe that we were naturally good at athletics and music, but not that great intellectually, and that was because for so many years they weren't allowed to be great intellectually. So even those who are sympathetic to us right now, a lot of them really believe that we're just not inclined to that, and so you have these people who make all these ridiculous excuses for our children when they shouldn't do that. And see, that's what I loved about Jesse Jackson. He wasn't trying to hear any of that kind of stuff. He told us, look, you go in that school, you listen to those teachers.
Absolutely.
You get what those teachers should get with your parents, and have a trinity together where you're working together to get it better. Now, my first teacher when I started going to the desegregated schools in Mount Pleasant in 1971, after spending time at Janie Moore, which was then segregated, in the Gilliard School in Charleston.
You went to Janie Moore at one point?
Yeah, from 1970 to 71, before desegregation.
Okay.
I was at Janie Moore for 1 year.
Okay.
And then with desegregation, I started going to Mount Pleasant Academy.
That's right.
And my teacher there was a white lady named Bertie Sanders. She would bring books for me to read. She would have me speak in front of the class and everything. And that lady believed it. That lady was a white lady from Hemingway, South Carolina, with a thick hillbilly accent. And I'll tell you that, and so every year before she died, I would come to her and see how she was doing and thank her for what she did by taking me under her wing. And I told her that, listen, you know how it was back in the day in Mount Pleasant when the white kids used to throw rocks at us for going to their neighborhoods and all that other stuff?
That's right. I beat up a lot of them.
Well, see, I was kind of on the weak side, so I couldn't fight too well. So I had to do a lot of running. But at the same time, though, I told her that if it was not for people like her that took me under their wing, I would have grown to be a very hateful person. It was because of you taking me under your wing when I was a boy that made me not look at people through the lens of race and color, that good and evil do not come in colors, okay? So I was fortunate with that. But then, of course, I met teachers who were like the opposite of that, too. Because real life is complicated. You're not going to find 100% good or 100% bad either way. But the idea is, Jesse told us that night at the Gilliard Auditorium, your attitude determines your altitude. So if you believe
that's worth quoting,
that you are good, well, that's why I'm quoting it now, because I told him when I was with him at Charity Baptist Church for his birthday party, I quoted a lot of what he said that night that I remembered from when I was 14 years old in 1978 to when we were having that little celebration together in 2019 when I was a grown man. That was the impression he made on me. So now that he's gone, I take things like that. I take from what I read from Martin Luther King. I take what I read from Frederick Douglass. I take from Bishop Henry McNeil Turner and our own Miss Martha Jenkins, what Adam Clayton Powell taught her in Sunday school. They passed that stuff down to me. So it's my job to pass that to the youth so that they could pass that on further. Because see, what Dr. Usman said in Africa, you know what he told me? A wise man plants a seed and knows he might not live to sit under the shade.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all about.
That's real. That's as real as it gets, and that's what leaders do.
That's right.
Leaders plant the seeds, and
right.
They ain't even worry about how that tree develops.
That's right.
They just plant the seed. And you know, Damon, it's very unique that you talk about us growing up, and you know, we were fortunate that we grew up in a segregated school system for the most part.
Well, we were kind of in that borderline, in that,
right.
You know, the first couple of years I was in segregation and the rest of it was desegregated, but it was still the early years of desegregation.
That's right. That's right. And the ironic thing about that, again, is that I didn't grow up in a school system where they were all black school teachers.
Right.
So you know,
but my dad was a teacher. You got to remember that.
I know.
So that skewers the count.
I was just getting ready to say, a lot of our households did not have a Professor Fordham before there was a Professor Fordham, right? So your dad was a teacher, so you learned that, and you learned all of that academic part in the house just as much, right? And so not all of us had that,
right?
But again, there was never a time when my mom would tell me, well, you listen to this teacher and you don't listen to that one. You know, no, you better listen to them all. I think one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, and you didn't have this problem because you weren't the same kind of student I was. I don't want to say what kind of student I was, but I had a teacher in high school named Miss Libby Saunders.
Oh yeah, right across the street from me.
Let me tell you something.
Tell me something.
Miss Libby Saunders would say some of the most foulest things to me, like she was my mama. And if there was ever a time in Wando High School, and I acted a fool quite a bit, that I acted a fool, principals, teachers knew to correct Johnny Wright, go find Miss Libby Saunders.
Yep.
And that, to me, I hated. I hated having her in that school because she was correction for me. And I could not, anything she said, I had to do it because she was like family. She was like a older sister
Right.
in school. And I can remember my older sister, Antoinette Vanderhorst, if y'all remember her.
Mm-hmm.
I think they brought Netta to school, to Wando, to substitute, so she too could help me.
Wait, were you in the same class where she was subbing?
No, I wasn't necessarily in the same class as Netta sub, but I think they literally brought Netta to Wando so she can control Johnny Wright sometimes. And so I always found that funny. But Libby Saunders, when I think about her, I think about the fact that we had a teacher, even though she looked just like me, she wasn't necessarily, she taught us, but then she was also correction.
Well, yeah, but that's what good teaching is supposed to be about. And see, unfortunately, because there's this gap between the time that now I'm not going to pretend that everything and all the adults back then were perfect. Mm-hmm. They weren't. You did have cases where if the teacher didn't like the parent, that they would take it on to the kid. That did happen every now and then, but that was the exception and not the rule. Mm-hmm. You see, mm-hmm. But the main point of all this, Johnny, is this: we had a foundation, and over the years, that foundation degenerated mm-hmm. to what we have now. I mean, mm-hmm. today, like for example, Norwood Smoke, who was a teacher then at Wando, I never had him in my class, but he was known for being quite raw in his correction with the students, right? Mm-hmm. But guess what? Those still learn from him. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now today, if you correct the child in the least, oh, you're lowering their self-esteem and so on and so forth. But you know what? Here's the thing about all that. A lot of what we went through back then, it built our character.
Absolutely.
It taught us at an early age that if you can persevere over adversity, that you can be a strong adult and that you can roll with the punches. Mm-hmm. Now, I would not want my little nieces and nephews to go through some of what I did in those days. But I'll tell you this, though, in a sense, a lot of what I did made me what I am today. Mm-hmm. And that's also helped me make the young people who I deal with what they are today. So it served a purpose.
I'm so proud of you, Damon. I want to tell you that, man. I mean, we grew up together as kids. Mm-hmm. And I watch you. And again, like I said, when we were in elementary, we were in middle school and high school, you were smarter than all the teachers. But, I had a chance to be around you. So, it didn't matter how smart Damon Fordham was, whether he was smarter than all the teachers. Damon was still, we grew up as together.
Right.
And I just let me be clear. You almost was my brother-in-law. Damon used to like my sister.
Hey, stop! Hey, why are you bringing? Why you got to bring this up in public, man? Jesus!
But anyway, I just had to get that
Lord
in
because
I love to say it. But one thing I do want to get, I want to get your thoughts on. In Iowa, mm-hmm. they're suggesting and recommending 4-day schools. Now, and the ironic thing about it is kind of catching on, Damon, because I was on another show earlier in the week, and we were talking about Iowa school and how other school systems are contemplating 4-day school week. Now, they're using all kind of reasons as to why. I personally think that they need to stay in school year round and have a couple 2-week break every now and again. But what are your thoughts on Iowa school system? And the fact, if you want to Google it and find out more about it, it's called the school system is the River Valley Community School District in Northwest Iowa. What do you think about that?
In the words of the great Sir Isaac Newton, that was paraphrased in the song by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, When You and I Were Boys, what goes up must come down. And here's what I mean by that. You get to a point where a society, like when I was in Egypt, I got to see the pyramids and all that, and I thought about how that great civilization got fat, happy, and lazy, and corruption set in, and it led to the fall of that empire. A friend of mine sent me a picture of the Colosseum in Rome. Rome was a great empire. It rose, got fat, happy, and then fell. See, this is what's happening with the United States right now, in that there's a saying about how hard times make strong people people make good times make weak people, weak people make hard times. That's what's happening to America now. Right now, I think the Japanese children stay in school 6 days a week, and look at how far ahead Japan is in the world. when I went to Africa and saw how well those students were doing over there with no excuses and even with the poverty and everything, I said, Marcus Garvey was right in that while at one time the British were looked down upon as the Saxon dogs of Europe, within 1,000 years, they ruled the world, okay? So it stands to reason that what I saw with the students in Africa right now with their hard work and tenacity, it would not be surprised to me that after you and I are gone, if Africa one day rules the world. And I told many African students that. So here we've got so much in plenty and so much of all of our basic needs are met that they're getting lazy and soft, and bit by bit, that kind of lazy attitude of going for what's convenient, that'll help destroy America. So I'm not for that.
Yeah. It's I literally had the Iowa school system as my dummy of the week because they're a big dummy for doing that.
Go for that.
And I can never support that. So yes, I got to throw it in there. My dummy of the week is the River Valley Community School District, and it's dumb to even consider switching to a 4-day work week. And how does the teachers benefit? How does the students benefit? Superintendent, you're my dummy of the week because that's stupid, and I think kids need
because
more time than less time.
Because all they're going to do is stay on the phones and play games and all that other stuff. They're not going to do anything educational in those extra 3 days. Man, please.
And in fact, they need to be in school because, I just...
Well, right now, Johnny, just let me interject by saying this. Mm-hmm. As we speak, according to the United States Department of Education 2022 survey, 54% of American adults right now cannot read above a 6th grade level. How's that going to help?
Yeah, you're right. That's just heading in the wrong direction.
I agree.
And so, just the mere thought of that happening is worth talking about, right? Because, these are the kind of conversations that talk radio is good for. And any of you are a listener out there and you got an opinion about this, and I still got a few more minutes, you can call in 843-614-4160, 843-614-4160, and talk about anything that I'm talking about today. Or if you want to have a question and a comment for Professor Damon Fordham, you can. You only got a couple minutes to do so if you want to call in. One thing I do want to mention, and I am so grateful, I guess, that I was away in the military during the crack era.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that earlier, and how you felt that we lost a large portion of society as a result of that era. Mm-hmm. I was so happy that I was away in the military and didn't get a chance to see it and or experience it. So I didn't know the level that it rose to for as far as society and some of the things that it caused. But the more I hear later on, it seemed like it was quite detrimental.
Well, I was, dealing with college and then taking care of an elderly mother and working and all of that during that time. So I wasn't about to get mixed up with that. But certainly, I knew a lot of people around us that you and I grew up who did. Mm-hmm. And of course, that would automatically scare me, even if I had no interest to that to begin with. Mm-hmm. But my big hope for the youth with all of this is as follows. Is that the best hope for America right now is if this young generation learns from the mistakes that the current generation is making and do better to move forward.
Outstanding. We're up at the end of the show. I want to thank you all for being a part of this show. Damon, I really want to thank you, man, for being here with me today. We got to do this again real soon.
Oh, most certainly.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. I want to make sure I give a shout out to all the sponsors. Brisbane Mortuary Transport, a veteran-owned business. Hannibal's Kitchen, Blake Street. And they did the food Friday night at the finale on Boone Hall. Excellent food. Family Seafood Market. And they were open today, 843-747-1999. Check Masters, Rivers Avenue. J. Wright and Friends, $ J. Wright Show on Cash App. ILA Local 1422. Boone Hall Plantation. East Cooper Disco Kitchen, open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday through Friday. Wilson Rouse family. Again, Professor Damon Fordham, it was a pleasure. And you all stay in peace. Until next week.
To Miss Martha Jenkins and all the other adults who grew up over us when we were kids, your work was not in vain. Johnny and I turned out all right.
Outstanding. That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much, sir.